Jolly good. Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Cabinet meeting, 20th of January 2021. Straight into the agenda. We'll start by seeing if we have any apologies. I'm aware of apologies from Councillor Anna King. Sadly, Anna, as many of you know, works in a sort of key worker setting, and it would appear as though she has probably contracted COVID. She's awaiting test results. Do we have any other apologies at all?
No, none, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, we'll move to our minutes of our previous meeting. Can I ask if anybody has any queries or suggested alterations on the minutes? Or can I ask you to confirm that they're agreed?
Propose they be approved, Chair.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 3, we do have intention to hold part of this evening's meeting in private. This is regarding the Newton building, which you'll see we'll be discussing at item 8. There is in it commercially sensitive information, and the nature of that is costing information, which were it more public, may reduce the opportunity for the public taxpayer to get best value through any processes. So as a consequence to which we'll be taking that item in private. Francis, can I just confirm, last Cabinet meeting, we did something quite clever to minimise the disruption. Do we need to look at the appendix before we then come back publicly to take the decision on item 8?
Yes, yes, Chair. In terms of the private stuff, what I suggest is that Cabinet have very short adjournment just to receive the information in private. Cabinet will have read the information, so it's just any questions Cabinet might have of officers. We have that bit in private, and then reconvene so that our normal practice is to have the decision making actually, the full decision making in public. So the decisions actually made in public. So I think just a short adjournment will do it, Chair. Yeah,
and the mechanics of that, does that just mean that Maisie suspends the YouTube broadcast? Everybody on the screen is allowed to remain for that part, as far as I can see. So we just suspend the broadcast to YouTube and then fire it back up again when we're ready to take the decision publicly.
That's right, Chair.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Francis. That's terrific. I'm not aware that we have any deputations or public addresses, although we do have some councillors registered to speak on some of the items as we come to them. Can I ask if any member of the Cabinet has any declarations of interest in anything that's appearing on the agenda?
No.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Right, in which case we'll go on to item 6, and quite a few reports here. We're grateful for all the work that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee have been doing. What we have here is a series of responses, and the first one, item 6A, is response to Overview and Scrutiny Committee review impact of the move of the university. Now, Tim will just take us through some of the highlights, I think, of that, followed by which we have two speakers, registered Councillor Russell and Councillor Roberts. Tim, over to you.
Thanks very much, Leader. This report is a response to work by Overview and Scrutiny concerning the effect of the move of the university main campus. They reported, as you'll see in the past, and they made 5 recommendations, which are set out from paragraph 3 onwards. The first 3 have been implemented. The first of those is to investigate the possibility of using empty units. Well, that has happened. The second concerns community groups, and that has happened. And the third was concerning the parking permit scheme for Thomas Chapman Grove and Malthouse Close along Southbridge Road to deal with parking problems and other unsociable action in that area. Recommendation 4 was to deal with the noise barrier, and that has in part been done in terms of dealing with the taxi drop-off point, and we're keeping, the recommendation is that we keep that under review. And then the 5th one, that the BID University and NBC look at ways of getting generating initiatives to bring community uses of empty buildings in the town centre. To some extent, that overlaps with the first recommendation, but that again has been ongoing. The town centre occupation, as you appreciate, is pretty fluid at present. And the recommendation there, once again, is that we accept that recommendation, but keep it under review. So that is it in a nutshell, Leader. And I'll be pleased to answer any questions that anyone may have, as far as I'm able.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. Just before we go to our speakers, does any member of the Cabinet have any questions they wish to raise? No? Okay, let's hand over to our speakers then. And the first one is Councillor Russell. I'm not sure that Catherine's with us in actual fact. Well, we have a second.
Councillor Russell gave her apologies, Chair, because she's not very well.
Well, we're sorry to hear that. We send our best wishes. We do also have Councillor Roberts, so we'll go straight to Councillor Roberts. Emma, welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the report specifically in relation to recommendations 3 and 4. I want to acknowledge the work that residents did in respect of the parking permits. In fact, resident petitions were presented at the scrutiny panel that considered these recommendations and made these recommendations. Sorry, I think we need to acknowledge the effort that the residents went to get that recommendation over the line. I completely acknowledge the university's commitment and the payments that they made, but we have to acknowledge that it took so much on behalf of residents to get that work done. And that leads me into the following recommendation in respect of the noise barriers and the installation of items there, because we have to make sure that work is done with consultation with residents, and that residents are involved from the beginning and not too late, which is what happened in respect to the parking permit. So we have to acknowledge that the permit should have been considered and the impact on parking should have been considered before the planning permission, or at the time of planning permission, and it wasn't, nor was the installation of noise barriers. So we've now got an opportunity to make sure residents are consulted about what happens with the installation of those noise barriers and how it works, and make sure that it works for them. And also that we make sure that that recommendation, whilst monitored by the council, is actually followed through into the unitary authority, and make sure that we don't miss anything as a result of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Leader. It's very opportune, I think, that Councillor Roberts should mention the work of the residents, because I mean, initially they had a pretty rough time, but instead of sitting there moaning, as could have happened, they actually worked for finding positive solutions, and that really has made everyone's life much easier to deal with, and it is great credit to them. And I take the point about consultation on the noise barriers, and we'll certainly see that carries on. So there are the recommendations as set out, Leader.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much indeed. Any further comments or questions on this report at all? No? Okay, in which case, as Tim has done, I'll draw your attention to the recommendations at section 2. Just ask you to confirm your agreement, please, to those recommendations. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Our next item, item 6B, is again a response to overview and scrutiny. This is regarding Northampton Post Unitary. And I think, Phil, you're going to take us through the highlights of this one?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Overview and Scrutiny did a very good piece of work looking at the future of mainly the civic side of things within the town post Unitary. And we can see here from the recommendations that they basically are all with regard to the mayoralty and civic assets, so to speak. And I think that's an excellent piece of work. Members will know that we have had the cross-party working group, and the cross-party working group has led to the establishment of the town council and the transfer of the mayoralty to the town council. and not only the mayoralty, but the assets that go with the mayoralty as well, the regalia, etc., etc. So we have moved on a long way. I think we've delivered what it, or are in the process of delivering what it is the scrutiny committee have recommended. I don't think there's any argument about that. I mean, there are some things that will be for the town council to consider. For example, the re-establishment, paragraph 2.18, the re-establishment of the roles of mayor's sergeant and town sergeant as honorary roles. I think that will be a matter for the town council to pursue, but we're happy to support that and ask that they consider that, or suggest that they consider that going forward. So there's the report, Chair. Happy to propose the recommendations, and I hope that they can be agreed. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Jolly good, thank you, Phil. Speakers in a moment. First of all, any cabinet member have any questions they would like to raise on this on this report? No, in which case let's go straight to our speaker is again Councillor Roberts. Emma, over to you.
Not me, Councillor Nunn. Haven't registered to speak on that item.
Okay, that's good. We had you down, and also Councillor Russell, who are not here. So I think probably, was there anybody who thought they were registered for this, or can we move straight to the recommendations? No? Okay. If there's no further queries, let's do that. As Phil has done, I direct your attention back to section 2, recommendations. Just ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations, please. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Takes us on to item C. This is response to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and this is the work on food poverty. Just to check on speakers, I've got, I think, on the list 6C, I've got Councillors Russell and Stone. Was it this one you were expecting to speak on, Emma?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Let's put you down for that then. And this would have been introduced by Councillor Anna King. What I'm going to do in her absence, Marion has kindly stepped forward at short notice and agreed just to take us through some of the key points of the report. So I'm grateful for that. And then it'll come back to me to propose the recommendations. So if I may, Marion, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the purpose of this report is a response to the report that came to Cabinet last month with the work undertaken by Overview and Scrutiny, which was to examine the extent to which individuals and families are experiencing food poverty and the range of contributing factors and changes that have been made, and how we can further support partners to support residents during hardship. And to review the impact and the concentration of food poverty across the borough. So as you can see, there are a number of recommendations. There are 17. As the report was received last month, some of those have already started. We've started to work closely with the DWP in terms of advice and support that we can give through the one-stop shop. But you'll also see from the report that there are a number of recommendations which we will be relying upon partners, whether that's the community forums, MPH, and there's several recommendations that will need to move forward into West Northants Unitary to be progressed. So the recommendations, all 17 of them are listed in section 2. So if I hand back to you, Chair, if that's okay to propose those.
That's lovely, Marion. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go to our speakers then. If we may, let's take Councillor Stone first, then we've got Councillor Roberts. Danielle, over to you.
Lovely, thank you so much. Can I first say how pleased I am that this work has been done, because I think the more understanding we create around all the issues, particularly around the issues about what creates that condition in the first place, so that we can put in ameliorating interventions, but also we can all work together to prevent people being plunged into that kind of poverty in the first place. I think the stronger we will be within our communities. I just wanted to make a couple of points really. We're looking at 2 unfolding issues that are going to contribute to poverty, food poverty, children in poverty. One is that our nurseries are facing a real crisis where a lot of them may collapse because they can't manage with the number of children in a socially isolated way to the extent where they can pay all their overheads. And so there is an urgent crisis there. If the nurseries collapse, it means a lot of working parents will no longer be able to go to work. So that is an urgent crisis that needs looking at. And the other one is the threat of the withdrawal of the universal credit uplift. If that was put in for a really good reason. And for me, it demonstrates the fact that we need really good benefit systems that take people out of poverty, don't keep people in poverty, because we know if that uplift is taken away, it is going to plunge a lot of families back into extreme poverty. So those are two urgent issues, it seems to me. But looking beyond that, I think there's still a huge issue. So people all over the town are addressing food poverty and very kindly taking food parcels into families and encouraging people to use the food banks. There is an issue over and beyond that, which is about families who don't have electricity, families whose cookers are broken, families who don't have a microwave oven. You know, poverty cuts very, very deeply. It isn't just about food. There are huge structural issues to do with poverty that we have encountered while we're doing the food delivery services for different organisations. So I think, you know, things like that are much, I know there's a hardship fund, but, you know, things like that are much more difficult to address because they're systemic poverty, really. And I think we need to address that. And I feel really, really strongly that all local authorities need to develop an anti-poverty strategy so that nothing that we do contributes to people being poor. And we do that in a really considered way. But nevertheless, I welcome all the recommendations and I thank everybody for that level of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Yes, and then if we take our second speaker, Councillor Roberts. Emma, back to you.
Thank you. Again, I second Councillor Stone's comments in respect of the work that went into this. Obviously, I was fortunate to sit on this panel and I learned so much as a result of doing so. I spoke last time about the importance of the urgency of these items, and I appreciate Marion confirming that some of the items are underway. And I know from other officers that the items have now started to move since the cabinet meeting, since the last cabinet meeting, sorry. And I think an important thing to note is that the food banks that are providing support in the area have also got together as a Food Aid Alliance as part of or connected to the DEFRA funding that's available. And that Food Aid Alliance is looking at mapping, which is one of the recommendations, to make sure that we are aware of which areas need to be filled across Northampton, and where the gaps need to be filled across Northampton. But I also wanted to highlight that we talked about on the scrutiny panel, and it's not so clear in the recommendations about how dangerous it can be of dealing with poverty in silos and not making sure that all of those elements are joined up. There's a reason why people are in this situation, and let's be honest, that's a shortness of cash. There isn't the money. They don't have the money to either feed or pay for fuel or pay their rent. And we've got to make sure that we take some of those recommendations really seriously. The living wage employment, an accredited living wage employer. And I can't stress how much emphasis we need to place on taking that through to the new unitary authority. And we've got to make sure that we do lobby MPs to change national policy. And we can do those things now as a council. And Councillor Stone highlighted the position in respect of universal credit and the damage that reduction or removal of that uplift will do. And it's so important that not only does Cabinet support these recommendations, but they actually immediately take steps to challenge that national policy and make sure that things are changed. We need as many people as possible in good jobs. We've got to improve earnings income for low income families. And we've got to appreciate that removal of that £20 may be the difference between feeding your family as a whole or a parent choosing to just feed their child. We've got to make sure that we keep this all joined up and we don't forget the momentum that we've promised, and that the motion that was passed at full council promised. We've got to make sure that momentum happens now, and I'm hoping that as well as supporting the recommendations, Cabinet will start to take those steps immediately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both very much for your comments. I don't think there's anything specific to pick up in terms of answering or whatever. I think if what your two comments have done is strengthened our resolve, perhaps behind the actions that are here to be taken. But is there any further comment that anybody wants to make on this paper before we move to vote on the recommendations? No. Okay. In which case, draw your attention to the recommendations, which, as always, are at section 2.
Sorry, I did have my hand
Sorry,
up.
you're going to come in there. I beg your pardon. My signal is really, really poor. James, over to you.
That's fine. No worries. No, thank you. I just wanted to make some comments regarding Councillor Stone and Councillor Roberts' comments, and I think that they're making some really good points there. But I can't help but come in regarding the universal credit thing, because as far as I'm concerned, I've looked quite deeply into the story, because I believe that this uplift should continue throughout the pandemic, and I agree with them that this should stay in place. However, there is no national policy to remove it at the moment. We all know that the reality is this was introduced for 12 months, and that's obviously due to expire in March, and at which time it will be reviewed. There is nowhere I've found that there's a policy to remove it, and I think the narrative being pushed, and I hate to get political here, it's quite disingenuous, to be honest with you. And personally, I think that most of us here would agree it needs to stay in place, but let's not peddle things which aren't true. This isn't due to be removed. There's no policy in place to do that. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, James. Phil, I think you were signalling to speak now.
It's all right, Chair. It's fine. Thanks.
Okay. Well, not common practice, but let's allow Emma. I see is keen to make comments, so we'll allow a short response, Emma.
I appreciate you humbling me and allowing me some leeway on that point, because I'm really pleased to hear that Councillor Hill will support the continuation of the £20 uplift. And I would urge all Cabinet members to have a look at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and the work that they've been doing and the campaign that they have in place to retain that £20 uplift. It's not political, this, Councillor Hill. It's important. And it's 100% imperative that we look at the significant work those organisations have done and not play around with it and make it political, but simply get it done. So I appreciate the commentary that you're making, but it's irrelevant, because we're on the same side here. We want people to have the right income and the income that they need. And if this goes some way to do it, then instead of arguing about it, we should just get on with it.
Thank you, Emma. Let's move on to our next item. Sorry, actually at that point we haven't taken the vote on the recommendation. So lots of actions here. Grateful for the work of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. If I may just direct the Cabinet's attention back to all the recommendations at section 2, I ask you to confirm your agreement, please. Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That takes us on to item 6D. Now that's the response to Overview and Scrutiny Committee review on homelessness and rough sleepers. Stephen, in a moment, will just pull some highlights out. Just going to check speakers here, because there's a few mismatches on the list. We had Catherine Russell down to speak. Was that the expected speaker, or is there somebody else who was due to speak, or perhaps in her place? No? Okay, that's great. Well, let's go straight to Stephen then, just to highlight some of the aspects of this response. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's September 2019, Overview and Scrutiny presented their review. We've been hard at it ever since, implementing many of the recommendations. I'm sure you're all aware of that. And indeed, in this response, we do accept the majority of the recommendations, just items 6 and 9. And I'll come back to those in a moment. It's basically the recommendations. We're talking about multi-agency working, and we've established a single homelessness forum to achieve that connection with all the agencies in town and bring a common voice to it. And I think that works very well. We all know about increasing the supply of accommodation. I would just pinpoint the government Next Steps accommodation program and the funding we've recently received to purchase flats and HMOs. Also, talking about development of new services as examples of that action or those actions, I give you the proposed drugs and alcohol team, which we've just had the funding for, the involvement of International Lighthouse, making that stronger connection with the Eastern Europeans, and again Key Stage Housing and the Hub, providing facilities for women, for example. All of this has happened. Housing First too, we believe the Everybody In programme and the Key Stage Housing project, the Hub, are both examples of that in action. But we are also seeking to establish a Housing First pilot scheme during the first 6 months of 21-22, and I think we can rely on the director with his strong connections at MHCLG to bring that to some sort of fruition. There were two other aspects. Recommendation 7, the alternative giving scheme. This is something again that the Single Homelessness Forum are going to lead on. They have a task and finish group and hope to bring a report back by April. And the other thing was the integrated system of working, which is something really that the Unitary have got to get to grips to. So we've largely deferred it into their hands. The Unitary, of course, are focused on safe and legal from day one. So other than that, hopefully they'll bring this forward during the forthcoming year. So returning to 6, this was about the social media strategy. The Single Homelessness Forum lead on this. We take steps to provide accurate information. We don't generally engage in the criticism we receive. Some of it is vile. I'm sure you're all aware of that. And it certainly is my personal view that to engage in it would simply seems to feed it even more. And number 9 is was about the recruitment policy and involving the personal experience of rough sleepers. We've always actively encouraged rough sleepers to volunteer and to apply for positions that become available, but human resources tell us that we would probably breach equal opportunities if we guarantee rough sleepers an interview for these posts, as opposed to other applicants who perhaps were never rough sleepers. So that explains why we haven't taken up recommendations 6 and 9. Happy to present the report.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. Does anybody have any queries or questions or comments that they'd like to make on this report? We're grateful once again for a great piece of work by Overview and Scrutiny. Are there any comments?
Absolutely.
No? Okay. In which case, with no speakers, I'll just draw your attention back to the recommendations as Stephen has at section 2. Just ask, please, if you would confirm your agreement to those recommendations. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. Right, the next one, response to Overview Scrutiny Committee on gangs and knife crime. Again, in Anna's absence, I'm very grateful to Marion to step in, who's going to take us through the highlights of the report, and then back to me for the recommendations. We have Councillor Duffy registered. Now, Councillor Duffy did submit a question, but I see that Councillor Duffy is with us. So we'll just hand over to you once Marion's picked out the highlights, Janice, if we may. Marion, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, so as you said, this report is a response to the report which came to Cabinet again last month, so a recent overview and scrutiny report with regards to the role that NBC can play in tackling knife crime and gangs in Northampton. There are 10 recommendations, and again, the Community Safety Manager has started to progress some of these. In particular, already secured some funding in terms of youth work for the next financial year. And again, some of the work will be reliant upon being progressed through working in West Northants to make sure those recommendations progress accordingly, and again, working with multi-agency support. So they're the 10 recommendations as outlined.
That's great, thank you very much. Just before we go to our Janice, our speaker, anybody have any questions at that point, or any members of the Cabinet with any questions? No, let's do that then. We'll go to Councillor Duffy. Janice, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the points raise was that intervention with children in schools, teaching them about gangs and knife cultures, was to start earlier and younger. And I really think that's necessary because cynicism about a child's futures can start very early. And with the COVID, the missed exams, it will be very hard for them to achieve all they can. I mean, in America, there's a guy just been elected president who's a stammerer, and of course, the first woman vice president. And I want children to feel empowered and inspirational to achieve all they want to achieve. And the question I had was, what is NBC going to do to assist youth agencies and volunteers to avoid Northampton youth from becoming a lost generation, which there's every danger of them becoming, and therefore resorting to gang culture for identity and companionship and a false sense of hope and identity, to escape the hopelessness of challenging family stresses, because there's going to be, especially in my ward, I should think unemployment and the stresses in the family are going to grow and be bigger. So everything that NBC can do to empower and finance youth centres, which is so necessary. I'm not talking about youth clubs. I want somewhere like the Blackthorn Community Centre. It's had its cafe extended, and they're going to ask agencies like Free to Talk to come in to help kids. I was horrified to hear that Free to Talk's budgeting and funding might be ending from the Home Office in 1 to 2 years' time. And I think that's appalling. I don't know if NBC can do anything about that. And of course, bullying. You hear about kids taking knives to school for self-defense. And with all these stresses and strains going on in schools and in society, it will encourage children to carry knives, because so many are saying, well, I have to do that for self-defense. I mean, I don't want children in Northampton to become cynical. I want them to be encouraged, because after COVID and the new normal, we're going to need all sorts of skills of all sorts of things. I mean, caring is just as valuable as mathematicians in the new normal. So anything that NBC can do to finance volunteers and community centres to run proper youth help, it has to be encouraged. The report had very many interesting points, I must say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, certainly an excellent report. And I think fundamentally agree with everything you've said there. I think, Janice, was there, Marion, if you don't mind me just asking, was there anything in there that you think you might want to quickly respond to or comment on, or should we just take those comments on board maybe?
I think definitely take those comments on board, but I should have drawn out when presenting the report, and apologies that I didn't, drawn attention to the best practice. So obviously one of the recommendations where we heard from officers at Merseyside about the best practice initiatives that they've been involved in. And another one was obviously the link to the short film that you can see in the report, and that was made by Free to Talk, the organisation Councillor Duffy's referred to. So I was amiss really not to point that out. But other than that, yes, definitely take on board those points and take those back to the community safety manager and team.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you very much indeed. Any further comments at all on this report? Questions? No? Okay, in which case, let me draw your attention again to the recommendations at section 2, just ask, please, if you would, to confirm your agreement to the recommendations.
Agreed.
Agreed.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Marianne. Takes us on to the last of these overview and scrutiny responses. And this is on the subject of adult social care, which I think, Stephen, is this one you're going to take us through?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Yes, a report on adult social care facilities, a very comprehensive report that explores demand and need and current facilities. And we have shared this with our the councils, the County Council and Daventry and South Northants, and I'm sure it's a report that the Unitary will take great notice of during their deliberations in the first year in office. The only comment I would make would be about recommendation 4, the hospital discharge scheme, where in fact Kettering learnt from our experience rather than we from them. We have had a dedicated housing officer working with the hospital since May 2015. I ask the Cabinet to approve the response.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed. We do have Councillor Stone registered to speak on this. Danielle, over to you.
Thank you very much. And what a pleasure it is to sit here listening to all the recommendations coming out of such a huge amount of work done by overview and scrutiny. It is really good to see. I just wanted to raise with you something that I raised at full council, which is about hidden need. So we know that adult social care has been working really hard with the hospitals and with housing to make sure that people aren't in hospital for longer that they need, that they get their home adaptations done. What we haven't got is a system of care to support the socially isolated. And what I reported at the full council on Monday, it's absolutely true that when we're going door to door delivering food parcels, we're coming across this really awful hidden need. And the hidden need is with elderly residents who are not known to social services. I don't understand how that happens. It must mean that they don't have maybe family, except I know some of them do actually, but they haven't been, social services haven't been alerted to their needs. I know that in the borough and elsewhere, housing and so on, people have trained staff to identify need when they're in contact with them. So I know that's happened. So I am at a loss to really understand why, when I knock on a door, I might find an elderly person who's not properly dressed, whose home is really dirty, who's got no fridge, who struggles. I don't understand how that has happened. I do know that the loss of day centres have exacerbated social isolation, and that would have been one avenue where people would have been tuned in and alert to that kind of need. I just think we need to be really conscious of the fact that much as we know a lot of the picture of what is happening with elderly vulnerable people, by no means do we know it all. And something else needs to be happening to make sure that those terrible, terrible cases that I've seen don't exist any longer, really. And I went to visit some old chap. I've been visiting him quite a lot. It suddenly occurred to me how ill he was, and he needed a social care assessment, and he died before I could get it for him. And I feel terrible about that, you know. And I just we need to think about what else we can do to help identify those areas of need where people are not linked in with social services yet, and how we can find the mechanisms to make sure they do get a social care assessment of one sort or another. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. I think again some points well made. Stephen, was there anything particular that you might want to comment?
No, I'm sure we can rely on Councillor Stone to bring those matters to the attention of the unitary too, and continue her campaign on that. Of course, at MPH they do have strong connections with the elderly tenants. I think I've reported that before, and maybe there's scope somewhere in this for a volunteer force to actually make that doorstep connection with people, so that these things can be spotted and referrals made to bring in the experts to deal with it. But I agree with most of what Daniel Stone's said on this. That's it, really. So we're back to presenting the proposals and
Thank you.
asking you to accept them.
Yes. Yes, I think we are. Thank you very much. As always, the recommendations at section 2. Can I just ask the Cabinet to confirm their agreement, please, to the recommendations? Agreed?
Agreed.
That's great. Thank you very much. And once again, as others have said, let's thank Overview and Scrutiny for the tremendous work they've always done, but most particularly for the huge body of work which has come forward from these reports, and thank our officers for the responses that they have put together there. Our next item is item 7. Just before.
Chair, can I just make a comment and echo those words, your words on that? I mean, I think Overview and Scrutiny have done a fantastic job, and they are to be congratulated on the work they've done over the years, not just these reports that we've got in front of us tonight. And, you know, we've got some very good recommendations here, recommendations that are going to go into the unitary. But I would not want Overview and Scrutiny within the unitary to lose sight of these reports. And I would hope that the Overview and Scrutiny within the unitary would be looking for updates, reports back on how the unitary has progressed these recommendations. So it's probably a question for our officers, and Tracy, if she's in the meeting. Are we actually preparing something to hand over to the scrutiny at the unitary in order that these reports that we've forwarded don't become lost and are continued to be monitored by scrutiny within the unitary? And I think, you know, it would be a real great shame if this work is not progressed and is not monitored by the unitary's overview and scrutiny process. So I'd like to see that done, but perhaps an officer could tell us what the arrangements are going to be. Thank you, Chair.
So certainly, if not, it's an excellent idea. There ought to be something handed over, which is that sort of work in progress. Not sure whether that's been considered so far. I don't know if anybody can comment, or whether we just undertake that we will ensure that we have something absolutely clear to hand over. Did anyone want to comment at all?
Chair Francis.
Francis. Yeah.
I've heard very clearly what Councillor Arrett has said, so I will be fully briefing Tracy on what needs to be done to ensure that the unitary captures what this cabinet are doing in terms of overview and scrutiny recommendations. So I will take that as an action.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Francis. That's great. Okay, that's tremendous. Sorry, forgive me. Had we got as far as the agreement? I think we had. We had agreed on the last report, and we've taken a vote on that. Okay, so it's before we move to item 7. May I should have declared an interest here. As an appointee of the Borough Council, I am a director of the Northampton Business Improvement District. So if I can ask Catherine, would you put me down as a declaration of interest on that? This is item 7, and it's a report on the renewal of the Business Improvement District, which is with Tim. Tim, over to you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Business Improvement Districts have a life of 5 years, and they then have to ballot their members in order to continue in existence. The town centre bid started in 2011 and was renewed in 2016. So in 2021, we're now coming round for the second renewal. I think the work that they've done during the last 12 months has shown the value of having a champion for town centre businesses when they've gone through the most difficult period that it would be possible for a town centre business community to go through. And they've been a great help in dealing with grants and things like that and promoting the town centre generally. They have prepared a detailed business plan, which is the 47-page Appendix 1. And our function tonight is to instruct the ballot holder, who is the local returning officer, to hold a ballot for the renewal of the business improvement districts in accordance with the regulations. And then the second recommendation is to delegate to me to vote on behalf of the council in that ballot. The timetable is pretty tight and it will commence in February. There is a 28-day period, and we expect to have everything done and dusted in time for takeover, if that's the way that the ballot goes, on the 1st of April. So simple recommendations and a simple ballot process. We're happy to answer any questions that anyone may have, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Thank you very much indeed. I don't think we have any speakers registered on this one. No, we don't. Does anybody have any queries or questions that they would like to raise on this? I think with that,
I should perhaps say, Leader, for anyone who isn't familiar with the process, that the ballot is actually a two-pronged one. One is a simple majority of the businesses in the business improvement district area, but there is also a vote by rateable value as well. And there are thresholds for achieving both of those before the renewal can take place.
yeah, no, absolutely, it has to be fully supported by the businesses, who of course then pay a levy in to support the activities. And it's a great thing for bringing additional things. The bid cannot pay for things that the council should be doing. It has to bring additional benefit to the businesses and to the town centre. So the recommendations, as always, are at section 2. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations, please?
Agreed.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. And our next report is back with Tim as well. This is the future of the Newton building.
Thank you, Leader. This report is in 3 parts: the report and then 2 appendices, one of which is a simple site plan, and the other is the business case, which will be considered confidentially. This is following on from the exciting decision in December, when we decided to buy the Avenue campus lock, stock and barrel from the university to produce a redevelopment for social housing, preserving the listed buildings. The Newton building was a school building adjoining the campus. It was subsequently used by the university, and they have spent a lot of money on it. NPH are currently accommodated in a 23-year-old it was a prefabricated building, which was temporary accommodation, which I've been reminded was following the floods of 1998. And it cycles between a fridge in the winter and an oven in the summer, and is really no place for our staff to be working, for any NPH's staff to be working. This presents a super solution because it will be more readily available in terms of timing than other solutions might have been, and would mean that hopefully there isn't so much freezing and frying for the staff in the future. It will be a conventional commercial lease, and the recommendations are set out as ever in 2. I should perhaps just draw attention to 2C, where you'll see that the consultation is going to be with the Cabinet Member for Economy and Assets. We have officers for economies and assets, but the Cabinet Member is actually Regen and Enterprise. So that's something that we just need to sort out. Anyway, whatever you call it, it's me anyway. So there are the recommendations, and I would commend them to the council to go ahead as soon as possible.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Tim. We have no speakers registered to speak on this item. Does anybody have any questions or any points they would like to make? I would completely echo Tim's words there. This is a great opportunity for far more suitable accommodation for the staff at Northampton Partnership Homes, and just a really great solution in a treasured old building of the town that they'll look after very well. But anybody else want to make any comments or ask any questions of Tim? Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you say, it's a very, very old and much loved building within Northampton, having been built as the girls' grammar school and subsequently been a middle school, etc. And it was my privilege to have been the chair of the middle school for several years, and I'm very, very familiar with the building, and it is one of the hidden treasures, I suppose, of Northampton in many respects. And inside it, it's got the school had a wonderful panelled library. The hall, in particular, with the oak panelling, again, is a really attractive feature. So I'm pleased that NPH are going to go in there, and I just hope that we can guarantee and reassure people that those wonderful assets within the building are retained and not lost in any way, shape or form. But it is a great building, wonderful facade overlooking the racecourse, and totally supportive of NPH. But let's make sure the interior is looked after as well. That's all I wanted to say, Chair.
Yes, absolutely. I think we can give that assurance. Stephen, did I see you single a moment ago?
Yes, please. I agree with all of that. It's an excellent thing we're doing here. I just wanted to recognise the involvement of the Director of Housing in the preparation of this report and all the effort he put in over Christmas to get it moving.
Yeah, absolutely. We would all agree. We're grateful to everybody involved in getting it this far. Very exciting project around it, of course, in terms of the number of new homes that will also be delivered. What's going on in that whole area is terrific. Are there any other questions or comments at all? At which point then, I think we'll leave that item there. We won't look at the recommendations. The absolute correct thing to do is we'll go into the private session after our next item. And it's only once we've done that and look carefully at that financial business case information that we can then come back, in my view, and take a vote on those recommendations in this particular report. We know that all cabinet members have had access to the business case already, but it is right that we get a final opportunity to discuss and ask any questions on it. So we'll leave that one there, and we'll move on to what I think might be a fairly short item. This is item 9, and in Anna's absence, I'll quickly introduce this, and this is proposed making of a public spaces protection order for the alleyway between Dunster Street and St Michael's Road. Cabinet and others will know that the PSPO is a flexible power that allows councils to implement local restrictions, particularly to manage antisocial behaviour, but they can only go in for 3 years. We've recently renewed one at the Marble Arch area of town because it had reached its 3 years, and the impact that one has had on antisocial behaviour has been very significant. Enforcement powers allow our own staff or police to enforce around the area of a PSPO. What's proposed here is gating, and you'll see that this has gone out to consultation. In fact, there is an appendix 2, which is consultation results. And it's absolutely clear that asking questions like, have you experienced antisocial behaviour? A modest number have not, but those that have experienced antisocial behaviour either infrequently or very regularly is a far greater number. The overwhelming support of over 80% is for those wishing for these actions to be put into place. And so as a consequence, it seems as though this is absolutely the right thing. And they voted to say that in the consultation that they would wish to see it closed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if any cabinet member has any query or either question or observation they want to make on this report? No. If not, we do have one speaker registered, which is Councillor Stone. So we'll just hand over to Councillor Stone to make her points. Tanya.
Lovely, thank you very much. I just wanted to say how glad I am this is coming before Cabinet. Can't wait for the work to be done. And I wanted to pay tribute to all the people who've worked for it. So it demonstrates to me that the residents on their own can't get very far, that councillors on their own can't get very far, that officers on their own can't get very far. But when we all work together, then we can move mountains, it seems to me. And I'm really grateful for the residents for hanging in there to improve their neighbourhood. They took the lead on this. Was supported by the councillors, and the officers then supported what they were saying. The residents were the ones who, with the officers, did the leafleting for the consultation. They've set up a Facebook page to support their own neighbourhood, and they are really vigilant in terms of reporting antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, and so on. They've got very high expectations of their neighbourhood. The councillors have worked with the residents to put in planters on a build out that was causing a huge problem there. And it's the residents who maintain, they do planting, they plant herbs, and, you know, they give me stuff when I go around there that they planted, which is just lovely. But let me tell you that the build outs in this area that haven't got planters on are a huge problem. And to me, that'll be the next thing that needs to be looked at. I don't know what, well, I know the build outs are put there for traffic calming. It doesn't work. It just attracts a huge amount of fly tipping, and it takes away really precious parking places. But I'd like to pay tribute to all the people who helped bring this recommendation about. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments, and I'm sure we'd all agree with that. As you said, it's a team effort. People have unified together, haven't they? And you only have to see in the consultation how strongly supported this is. So it's clearly a great thing. Mike, I think you're going to make a comment.
Yeah, just on those build outs, I really agree. I know that some years ago, County Councillor Winston Strachan had some success in a couple of roads in getting them removed, and it seemed to make a big difference. They do become a bit of a hotspot for fly tipping, so it'd be something that obviously it's not a decision for us at the moment, but it may be for those of us that are lucky enough to get on the unitary, and it's something that I think we should be petitioning them for.
Great, thank you, Mike. Any further comments or queries on this one? No, in which case, if I may, I'll direct your attention back to the recommendations. Section 2, just ask you to confirm your agreement, please, to those recommendations. Is it agreed?
Agreed.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. So we'll now take our private session. I don't think there's anybody we need to ask